Hi, well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Elena G. Levine. I'm president of Quantum Success Solutions, and it is my delight and honor today to talk to you about transitioning your career from academia to industry, and I'd like to express my appreciation to the American Geophysical Union Career Center for sponsoring this and many other webinars throughout the year. So I am really excited about this subject because I want to tell you, as a scientist, you have so many skills that are coveted by quote-unquote industry. And I'm going to get to what I mean by quote-unquote industry in just a moment. But I want you to start this webinar with a good feeling in your heart and your mind that even if you have been looking for jobs outside of academia in industry, and by industry here I mean in businesses that are for-profit, maybe in the nonprofit world, in the government agency sector, or in government labs, and anywhere else outside of academia. If you've been looking for jobs, I'm here to tell you that you are, as a geoscientist, and even more broadly as a scientist, you are coveted by businesses. You are coveted by the nonprofit world. You are coveted by many industrial sectors. I'm going to talk to you about why that is in just a moment, but I just wanted to give you sort of like a punch in the face just to say this is an exciting time for you, so you don't have anything to worry about. And somebody just wrote in a question. They wrote, I think it's pretty hard to find a job outside of academia. I've been looking for a while and nothing appears. Probably am I looking in the wrong place? And I would say to this person, great question, first of all. It goes to the entire thesis of today's webinar. The key thing I wanted to point out to you is that it's not that you're looking in the wrong place. I think it's that you are not clearly communicating your specific skills in the language of the industry that you are aiming to go work for in such a way that they will be forced to make a decision to bring you in, to engage you, to hire you. And we're going to talk more about that in just a few moments. Thanks for that start-off question because it's a great way to begin our day. So what we're going to be talking about is we're going to be going over what industry, why industry, quote-unquote, why industry wants you. We're going to help you identify and articulate your true value. We're going to discuss how you can determine the right career choices and paths for yourself. We're going to discuss how to craft that transition plan. And of course, we want to leave the door open. As any professional, no matter what skill we have, no matter what background we have, no matter what our education is, we know that as professionals, we never want to burn bridges. We always want to keep opportunities open and keep looking for opportunities. And one of those opportunities now and in the future might be that you want to come back to academia. Maybe you want to come back in a professorial capacity, or maybe you want to come back in an administrator capacity, or maybe as a staff member. Bottom line is we want to make sure that if you want to come back in the future, the opportunity is available. And in fact, that there are multiple opportunities to come back later in the future. So we're going to talk about that too. So first of all, let's start off by discussing exactly what the purpose is of any job in any company, in any industry, and that could be a government agency, that could be a government lab, that could be a for-profit organization, a nonprofit, even in academia, in any part of the known universe. This is very important for you to know because this is your number one skill as a scientist. Your purpose of any job is to solve problems. So whether I hire you to be a professor, whether I hire you to be an engineer in my oil and gas company, whether I hire you to be an administrator in my government lab, or whether I hire you to be a custodian in my not-for-profit, whatever it is, your job is to solve problems. And the reason that I, the decision maker, am engaging you and making a decision to hire you is because I know that you are going to solve my problems. And you're going to make my life easier, you're going to make my job easier, you're going to make my environment easier, and quite honestly, I know that the value that you're going to provide is going to be so superb that it's actually going to make me look good in front of my boss. These are the things that go on in the mindset of the people that are thinking about hiring you outside of academia. It happens in academia too, but we're talking about outside of academia for today. So I want to see, can you solve my problems? Now, if there is anything that a scientist is good at, if we strip away all the other things that you are fantabulous at, and I mean absolutely everything, there is always going to be at your core, the number one thing that you are going to be good at is solving problems. No matter what. You would not be successful in science if you did not know how to solve problems. And I don't just mean scientific problems. I mean the problems associated with being a scientist, some of which I'm going to talk about in just a few moments. So because you have this innate problem-solving ability, that shows me as an industry decision maker, as a hiring manager, that you have, first of all, the capacity to move into another environment, another ecosystem, and solve problems. They may be different types of problems, but they are problems nonetheless. And if you're a problem solver and you can articulate what your unique problem-solving capabilities are to me in my language, that's what's going to give me the opportunity to make a decision to bring you in. We're going to talk more about that too. So you have this problem-solving ability. You also have a lot of value in your scientific know-how. The skills that you have developed as a scientist or an engineer and the ability to actually discover and elucidate knowledge is an important skill. So you have this value. And so because you have this value and because you are the value creators in society, and think about that, you know, the business people, the people who go to school for marketing and finance and maybe management, they are taking your value, the value that you have created in a lab, in a research environment, in an experiment, as an engineer, things that you've been able to innovate around. They're taking your value and they're commercializing it. They're bringing it to the masses. They're finding ways to sell it. That's part of the business world, right? Well, guess who is creating the value? Who's at the bottom of that chain? It's you guys. It's the scientists and engineers. So because you're the value creators, because you create knowledge, because you discover knowledge, because you innovate around knowledge, that means that you have a lot more career opportunities than you might even realize. A lot more. And you also have a lot more control over your career than you might realize as well. And I just want to give this caveat. You absolutely have to love what you do, you know, in your life, or you will be miserable, and that will cause you to be unproductive, which will then cause you not to be able to solve my problems if I've hired you, which will then enable me to want to fire you, and we don't want that to happen. So part of what I want to emphasize today is to give you tools to help you look for things, opportunities, jobs, industries where you will be able to do what you love. Because there are so many opportunities out there that fit your skill set and your abilities from having studied science, particularly at the higher levels, you actually have so many more opportunities than you could imagine, and so we want to put some borders on that. And so one of those borders that we put on is we want to do what we love. No sense in doing what we hate when there is opportunity to do what we love. So the key thing is you have to be able to identify and then understand and then articulate your value, your specific value to the decision makers in a way that will cause them, that will enable them to want to interact with you, to bring you into their organization, to hire you. That's the challenge. That is a challenge. Let's talk a little bit about the value that you have as a geoscientist specifically, more broadly as a scientist and engineer, that you have in and beyond academia. So we've talked about the fact that you're a problem solver. You can take your problem-solving ability and the problems that you've solved in the lab, in the field, in your research environments, and you're able to translate that experience into solving problems in other ecosystems. That is an adaptive and a flexible capability. That is something that is innate to being a scientist. I don't have to tell you that you have this skill. You are flexible. You are adaptive. You are able to solve problems in new ways. You also have great critical thinking and analysis skills. You have a very disciplined approach to solving problems, especially for those of you that have gone on for higher degrees, particularly in the PhD. Just having a PhD tells an audience member, tells a participant, tells a decision maker that you had the self-direction and the self-motivation to continue with something that was extremely hard, extremely difficult, all the way to the end. And that goes for master's degrees as well. But even if you just have a bachelor's degree in the science, you know, you chose to study science. You chose to be a scientist. Science and engineering, it's the hardest things in the world. You chose the hardest thing in the world to study on the planet, in the known universe. That says something about your character. It says something about your attitude, which I'm going to get to more in a moment. It says a lot about how you actually attack problems. So this says a lot to me, and it is actually a big part of the value that you would provide my organization if I were to engage you, if I were to hire you. Now, you also have a great deal of computing skills. You know how to solve a problem from the ground up. You don't accept things the way they are. In other words, if you see something, you will make sure that all the parameters are the way they should be, and if they don't appear that way, you're going to pursue it in different ways. You're both holistic and you're detail-oriented. In other words, you see the problem 360 degrees, and you see it right there at the bottom. You solve problems in multi-dimensions. And, my background's math. I solve problems with decision trees. The ability to be able to see things 2, 3, 4 steps ahead is a great skill that is coveted in industry. You understand how the physical world works, obviously. You have a great deal of project management and teamwork experience, especially those of you who have worked on research projects that are large-scale, diverse, and across continents. Think about the physicists and the engineers and the chemists and the other scientists and engineers who worked on CERN, who worked on the Higgs boson. They were working on multicultural teams, multinational teams across continents. They were working with people from all walks of life, all different types of educational backgrounds, all types of different pedigree, and all types of different skill sets. The ability to be able to do that says a lot about somebody's character and says a lot about their value and the value that they could bring to my organization. You also have access to huge, huge networks. This is very important, and I'm going to get more into networking in just a little bit. But the key thing here is that I recognize that if I'm going to engage you, if I'm going to hire you into my organization, I recognize that as a scientist, you naturally have developed networks. You wouldn't be a successful scientist if you weren't networking, if you hadn't developed networks of people, of colleagues, of experts who can assist you with your projects. And so I recognize that when I hire you, I'm not just hiring one brain. I'm actually hiring your brain and your access to many, many other brains who are also as smart as you. And then you also know that your work has everyday applications. Somebody just asked a great question, and I want to clarify it because it is a great question. Somebody said, is my value and my skills the same thing? And I'm going to use those words interchangeably. I'm going to actually tell you what I mean by the word value in just a few moments, but you could use the word value to mean skills. It could mean the summation of your skills. It could mean the summation of your skills, experience, expertise, education, pedigree, credentials, awards. It could mean many. It could mean a multitude of things. The point that I'm making with the value is when I bring somebody into an organization is what can you do for me? What can you provide for me that will allow my organization to grow, to prosper, to gain more profits, to gain more customers, whatever is making my organization move. We're going to talk about that. That's where the value is. So the value definitely incorporates skills. It definitely incorporates your experience. It's the summation. That's what the value is. Great, great question. Okay. So now, I talked to you a little bit just a moment ago about the value that you've gained as a scientist that are related to problem solving, your problem solving abilities, and related to your abilities to be, that you gained as a scientist that are very sciencey in focus. In other words, they're how you actually solved your science problems. But I want to emphasize, and this is a key thing that a lot of scientists in academia do not realize, you have a tremendous amount of non-science skills which are highly, highly coveted by industry. And here when I say industry, I mean businesses for profit, I mean non-profit organizations, I mean associations, I mean government labs, government agencies, and every other type of organization on the planet. So let's take a look at this list, and you prove to me, I wager $100 that you cannot prove to me that you do not have these things, because I know that as a scientist you had to have developed these skills. Let's think about this. First of all, as a scientist, you have to give talks, you have to write papers, you have to communicate your value, you have to communicate your scientific expertise and your value and your problem-solving abilities to other people if you're going to engage them in collaboration. So therefore, you have developed excellent oral and written communication skills. Well, guess what? One of the top skills that any company looks for when they hire somebody is excellent oral and written communication skills. So since you got it as a byproduct of being a scientist, let's let the community know. So this is going to be something that we're actually going to put on our resumes. We're going to put this in on our LinkedIn profile. We're going to put this in different places where people will actually be seeing our documents, our marketing documents, so that they know that we are a great communicator. And they can also get examples of it through our portfolios, which we can share online. I'll talk more about that. So you have great communication skills. You also have excellent leadership, team building, and conflict resolution skills. Think about it. Most scientific projects are done in a team basis. You have to either be the leader or be a team member. Even if you're a team member not actually managing or leading that team, you have to contribute to the functioning aspect of that team. You have to make sure that that team is efficient, that that team is producing value, that that team is solving the problems that you are faced with. That is a skill. You have to make sure that you resolve conflicts quickly. You know, if you are about to try and get this paper out and you have a team member who is not pulling their weight or is going crazy because all they're watching is, Breaking Bad or The Simpsons or something like that, that's a conflict. I can understand that conflict quite a bit. That is something that you have to deal with. You have to work with the team member to identify the conflict and to get rid of that conflict, to resolve that conflict as quickly as possible. And in industry, conflict resolution, being able to work on a functioning team that actually delivers an output that is considered to be valuable to that community, and does so, being able to do this in a conflict-free zone, is something that is coveted, is something that is looked at as a prize skill. And in fact, in your interviews with industry, when you go on job interviews, or when you're doing informational interviews, when you're doing your networking, which I'm going to go into in a bit, you will find that many times they will ask you questions about conflict. They will say, tell me about a time where you were on a team and there was a conflict. How did you handle that? So you should know that this is something that they have in their minds, and therefore as you go forward in your career, as you start career planning, as you start networking, as you start interviewing, be ready to identify examples where you had conflict and you were able to win as a result of that conflict. In other words, you were able to figure out what the conflict was and resolve it and move the team forward into a winning position. You also have a lot of project management skills, and believe it or not, the term project management and the subject project management is an actual hard business skill. People actually can go and get a certificate in project management. They teach it in business schools. So you have that naturally from being a scientist. You also have accounting and finance experience because if you've written grants, if you've been on grants, if you had to budget, that's accounting and finance. HR, human resources and training experience, if you have interacted with, interviewed, hired proteges, undergraduates, team members into your team, into your lab, into your research group, if you train them on certain pieces of equipment or help them work on a research project, that's human resources and training. Procurement relates to inventory. Have you helped to bring inventory into the laboratory? Have you managed the supply chain of items that are needed to make sure that the research group is functioning? Risk management. Oops, the Ebola falls on the floor. What do I do? That's risk management. You're able to assess risk, you're able to minimize risk, and you're able to manage risk. And let me tell you, you might not realize that you have this exceptional ability, but let me interrupt myself to tell you the story of a colleague of mine who got a job because she put her resume on the AGU job board. So I want to be very clear that a lot of opportunities are hidden, but in this case, this person put her resume on the AGU job board, and she is a PhD level geophysicist, geoscientist, and somebody, a major multinational company, found her resume. She did not have any industry experience, but they found her resume on the job board, and based on her use of certain terms in her resume, like, for example, risk management, the company recognized that she would be able to solve their problems and invited her to apply for a job they had in what? Oh, risk management. It was a risk management position for this multinational company, and she was able to get the job, and she did a great job in getting the job, in communicating her value in such a way, in the language of that industry, in the language of that company, in such a way that they knew that she would be able to make their lives easier, she'd be able to contribute to the company, she would be able to solve their problems. And it was all about risk management. And so I want to emphasize, first of all, put your resume on the job board for AGU Career Center. That's number one. But number two, you have developed a risk management expertise in being a scientist This is something you want to put on your resume. This is something you want to communicate when you are having your 30-second commercials, when you're interacting with people, when you're networking at mixers. And just very quickly, the rest of the skills that you have that are quote-unquote beyond science include sales and marketing. You know, when you write a paper and when you write a grant application, you are marketing. You are trying to convince the grant agency to give you money for your project. That is marketing. That is salesmanship. You probably have public relations and event management. You have customer relations. Who are your customers in academia? Your customers are students. Your customers might be your boss. There's a multitude of customers that exist in academia. We don't call them customers, but if you do, then that gives you an advantage, a competitive advantage in the job marketplace because you're already using the language of the industry when you're communicating your value and your skills. And you know, many years ago when I was graduating from the University of Arizona with my math degree, oh no, this was after I graduated, I had a job at the U of A. I was working for the University of Arizona in communications, in public relations for the physics department, and I was looking for jobs outside of academia. And so on my resume, I would talk about how I developed marketing campaigns that increased our customer base. And of course, people outside of academia knew exactly what I meant. All that meant to them was that I knew how to attract customers, I knew how to keep customers, and I knew how to upsell customers. That means that I knew how to keep customers happy and I knew how to keep selling them items that they would keep coming back and spending more money in my organization. But of course, I was working for a physics department. So who are those quote-unquote customers that I was talking about? They were students. I was actually referring to a brochure and a campaign that I had developed to market the graduate program in the physics department to potential applicants. Those were my customers. So you see, I had a problem that was very academically focused. How do I get more students? How do I get more grad students into this department? But when I went out of the borders of the university, when I was trying to promote myself to decision makers in industry, in business, I used the word customers. I used the word marketing to describe my tasks, to describe my problem-solving abilities. And in doing so, it actually helped the decision makers to make a decision. They would invite me in for interviews, and they would offer me jobs. That's what we're talking about today. So I'm going to get more into that in a little bit. So, and I see there's a lot of questions, so I'm going to probably just come back at the end to answer these questions. So just keep those questions coming. They're great. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, you have the wonderful grant writing opportunity, grant writing experience, which is also very useful. So now somebody asked earlier about the issue of value, and I just want to clarify what I mean by that. And you'll hear me talk about this a lot. For those of you that have heard me speak before, for those of you that are some of my fans that have followed me from webinar to webinar and AGU event to AGU event, I welcome you back. You've heard me talk about the connection between brand, attitude, and reputation. This is very, very important, particularly as you transition out of academia. So your brand is your promise of value and how you deliver that value. And that value, as I mentioned, is that summation of all of your skills and experience and expertise. Your promise of value should be very easy to define. It's very specifically, or very broadly, I should say, your promise to deliver excellence, dependability, and expertise in whatever it is you do. That's your brand. That's your promise of value. And see, the key thing is that particularly as you transition out of academia, you have to be able to communicate that brand to decision makers in such a way that will enable me to make a decision. So knowing what your brand is, knowing what you, and how you deliver that value, how you deliver that problem-solving ability is very, very important. The next thing that's also very important is your attitude. And you know what? In a certain respect, attitude is almost at the top of this pyramid of brand, attitude, and reputation. Attitude itself is a coveted characteristic. You might often see this even in job advertisements. Why is attitude so important? Because I can teach you, if I bring you into my organization, into my company. First of all, if I bring you in, I know that you have the raw materials. You have the skills to be able to solve the problems. I wouldn't bring you in. I wouldn't even probably interview you on site if I didn't know that you have the raw materials, those skills to be able to solve the problems. But what I am assessing when you come on site, when I'm interviewing you, and let's go back in time a little bit to when I'm networking with you, when I'm interacting with you for the first time, maybe at a mixer at the AGU conference or at some other event. What I'm assessing is your attitude. I'm seeing how you communicate your brand to the world. I'm seeing how do you interact with others. I'm seeing your personality, and I'm seeing if that personality and that attitude will fit in with the corporate culture of my organization. And attitude really is everything, because I can't teach it. I cannot teach you how to have a good attitude, how to have a hardworking attitude, how to have an attitude whereby you interact with team members in such a way that it's a functional team and you look to snuff out conflict as soon as it possibly pops up in a way that continues the functionality of the team. I cannot teach that. I can teach you skills. I can teach you how to code this. I can teach you how to solve that, but I cannot teach you attitude. And so people really do look to see, does this person, do you have a hardworking, enthusiastic, positive, professional attitude? Professionalism simply is being serious about your craft at all times. So do you have that attitude? If you have that attitude, if that attitude exudes itself, if it oozes in everything that you do, then that is going to give you a competitive advantage. And just to give you a quick example, many years ago when I worked for the physics department in the communications office, I needed to hire a student assistant to hire me, to assist me in my efforts with communications. And I had the door to my office closed when the candidates came in for their interviews. And as the candidates came in, 9 out of 10 of them did the most appropriate professional thing when they are faced with a closed door in a professional interviewing scenario. They knocked on the door and they waited for me to say enter, and then they entered. But this one guy I'll never forget, because he just walked right in. He didn't knock. He walked right in. He sat down in the chair in front of me, and the chair that he sat in was one of those rocking office chairs. He put his hands behind his head and rocked back and forth with his hands behind his head throughout the entire interview. And what was he telling me? He was telling me that he was clearly the man. He was awesome, he was cocky, and he wanted me to know it. And what that tells me is what his attitude is. He was communicating his attitude. And as a related to that, as a result of him communicating his attitude, which was one of being a cocky jerk and not knowing professionalism and not knowing how to be polite, what he was actually communicating was his brand. He was telling me that his brand was not one of great skill, great expertise, great problem-solving ability that can make my life and my problems easier. He was actually communicating something very negative about himself, something very, perhaps even the opposite of what his brand actually was. But here's the thing. Perception equals truth in the minds of the publics. Perception equals truth in the minds of the publics, and everyone is a member of the publics, including your clone and your twin. And so when he is communicating his brand to me, I am perceiving it as what I'm seeing it as something negative. And so that is from his attitude. So you have to make sure that when you walk into a room, when you walk into an interview, when you're interacting with people on the net, in email, in correspondence, on the phone, on Skype, anywhere, that your attitude is one of total positivity, total enthusiasm, energy. You're excited to be there. You want to learn more. You want to help them. You want to solve their problems. That kind of attitude gets you interviews. That kind of attitude helps you land jobs. So that's very, very important. And then the last piece of this trifecta is the reputation, and it's actually what people know about your brand, and it is your most important asset. So attitude is extremely important. Attitude is everything, but I would actually argue that reputation might be just a small modicum more important than attitude, because the reputation, your reputation, is what people know about your brand and your attitude, and your reputation is going to sneak into nooks and crannies in the ether throughout your profession, throughout different industries, places you'd never expect, and we need to make sure that it always is carrying a positive message about your value and your attitude. That's what gets you access to opportunities. That's what gets you access to opportunities outside of academia in particular. So this is a tool that you can use, and I can send you a link to this if you're interested. But this is an example of a tool that you can use to start identifying your value, your skills. And what you do is you take a look at all the different jobs and experiences and TA-ships and RA-ships and volunteer jobs you've had, and you identify what are the technical skills that I've gotten, and those technical skills include your scientific skills, your engineering skills, instrumentation and machining skills, as well as computing skills, which are your software skills, your platforms, and your languages. Your business skills, which are that list that I gave you earlier, as well as your linguistic abilities. If you know how to speak another language, especially if you're transitioning outside of academia, that is a coveted skill. And a lot of scientists forget to put that I am bilingual, I'm trilingual, I'm quadrilingual. Put that on your resume. Let me know that you'll be able to talk to my customers in China, Japan, and in Korea. Let me know that you can speak 4 languages. This is very, very important. It gives you a competitive advantage. The soft skills are things like oral, written communications, diplomacy, conflict management. This is just for your purposes. The skill inventory matrix is a personal tool. You don't ever have to show this to anybody. It's just for you to start thinking about what are the skills that I have, what is the value that I can provide to industry. And then finally, the characteristics. Starting to think about what were the characteristics that I developed in these different experiences. I realize I'm very results driven. I'm very detail oriented. I work very well up against a deadline. I can summon my talent at will, to quote somebody. So the other tool I wanted to present you with, which will be very useful in your career management plan and in your career planning beyond academia, is the SWOT analysis. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is a typical skills, and this is a typical tool that you actually see in marketing departments. So marketing departments at universities and even in industry, marketing departments will engage a SWOT analysis to find out about the opportunities and threats, strengths and weaknesses relating to the market and the ecosystem and the temperature of the market as it relates to the type of product that they are or service that they're trying to sell. Now, strengths and weaknesses are intrinsic, and opportunities and threats are extrinsic. So what you can do is you can put together your own personal SWOT analysis, where you take that skill inventory matrix and get into a little bit more detail. What are my strengths? What do I do well with? What do I work well with? What are my great skills that I have that are strengths? So what are my characteristics that give me strengths? And what are my weaknesses? You have to be very honest with yourself. If you are interested in moving into data science, but you don't know how to code, it might be a weakness if you don't know how to code. So that could be something that you would have to put down on your list. This also is a private document. You don't have to show this to anybody. And then the opportunities and threats. So you'll be thinking personally, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? The opportunities and the threats are going to come from you networking. And I'm going to go more into that in just a moment. But I just wanted you to see this analysis tool, the SWOT analysis tool, so that you can jot it down and you can use that as you do your career planning. But we're going to look and see how we can identify opportunities and how we can identify threats to those opportunities. And when I say threat, I don't necessarily mean, if you pursue this job at that oil company, I'll never speak to you again. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that it's a potential detractor. If you're interested in working for an oil and gas company and you live in Tucson, Arizona, and you can't move from Tucson, Arizona because maybe your family's here or for whatever reason you want to stay in Tucson, Arizona, that's a threat to the opportunity. Because there are not many, I don't even think there are any oil and gas companies in Tucson, Arizona. So you would have to move if you were interested in that. So that's a threat. So it could be a geographic threat, it could be a family threat, it could be a personal choice threat. There are many quote-unquote threats that could derail your pursuing a particular opportunity. But that you have to be honest with yourself about. Only you can determine what is a threat. I can't tell you what a threat is. But there are certain threats that are even more extrinsic in the sense like, for example, if you are interested in working in New York City as a copy editor and they only pay $30,000 as a copy editor, be prepared to work in poverty or not work there at all. That's a threat to that particular type of opportunity. So if you were to take an internship that was free in New York City and you had no other income, that economic ecosystem would be a threat to the opportunity. So there's lots of different types of threats. Okay. Now I want to talk about what I mean by industry. And this is a lot of research. This is where your research skills and your problem-solving skills are going to actually come in handy in planning your career and planning your transition. So let's learn about industry. We need to first identify what does that industry consider to be success. Now, in academia, we know what academia considers to be success. They consider to be outputs like papers, talks, working with proteges, and getting grants. Those are just a few of some of the outputs that are considered to be success in academia. But in industry, generally, it's all about market-driven problem solving. And that goes for nonprofits, and it even goes for some government labs, and it certainly goes for government agencies. What does the market dictate is the problem that we have to solve right now. That's what industry is about. And that is sometimes challenging for scientists who are transitioning out of academia into industry. It's sometimes challenging for them to be able to formulate that you actually have to be thinking about a profit. Particularly in businesses, it's all about show me the money. It's profits over cachet. You will not be able to move forward in a company if you're not thinking about how is this innovation, how is this solution that I'm coming up with going to achieve profitability for the company. So the problems that you solve in industry, in quote-unquote industry, generally are related to increasing sales, cutting costs, and beating the competition. And think about this, this goes for government agencies too. You know, you are working, even if you're working on a scientific problem, you still have to make sure that you are able to increase sales, in this case, bring in money from certain parts of the other parts of the government, or bring in money from vendors. You have to be able to cut costs, and you have to be able to beat the competition. And this is very much the same case in the nonprofit world, where your customers are often members, and you definitely have to cut costs if you are going to increase sales, and sales are simply increasing memberships and increasing items that you sell to your members, or sponsorships that you sell to partnering organizations. So we have to learn more about our selected industry. We have to identify what are the problems. What are the problems they solve on a daily basis? What are the problems they hold sacred? What are the problems they solve on a yearly basis? What are the overall overarching problems? What is their language? What vocabulary do they use? You know, like I said earlier, when I looked at transition out of academia into the business world, I used the word customer. Just by using the word customer, that interviewer knew that I could solve their problems, knew that I was speaking the same language, therefore I was on the same wavelength, therefore I could be able to be a potential candidate for that job. So you need to know what is the language of that industry, and the way you find that out is through networking and through reading publications that are put out by that industry. You need to know, what does the industry value? Does it value skills? If so, what skills? Does it value experience? If so, what experience? Certain industries, particularly in the business world, they really, really value internships over research projects, over TA-ships, over RA-ships. So having the ability to do an internship or having that experience will give you an advantage versus somebody who doesn't. But I will tell you this, before I go on to the rest of this page, that as you move forward in your career, as you progress more in your career and get farther away from your last degree, what does become more important overall in any industry beyond academia, okay, what becomes most important is your experience and your skills. Your ability to solve the problems and the experience that you've had that demonstrates that you've used the skills to solve the problems of that industry. So early on in your career, your pedigree, your degrees, your credentials, maybe even your awards are more important because you don't have as much skills and you don't have as many experiences to demonstrate that you've gotten these skills, but having gotten the degree demonstrates a certain level of skill and demonstrates a certain level of problem-solving ability. But as you get farther and farther into your career, you will find that the skills and experience become a lot more important. And as a result, on the resume itself, the skills and experience end up going towards the top of the resume, and your degrees start going towards the bottom of the resume. It's very interesting to watch that happen. Just keep that in mind. Industry, especially businesses, really do value skills and experience Whereas academia, they're all about degrees and the pedigree and the credentials. They recognize that you have the skills to solve the problem, so they're not interested in learning what skills you have. They do want to know what your experience is. They do want to know what problems you've solved on a scientific level. But in business, in nonprofit sector worlds, in industry outside of academia, including government agencies and government labs, it's all about skills and experience. So the other questions that you want to ask when you're thinking about your selected industry are, who are the major employers? What are the trade and professional associations? Where are the industry clusters? In other words, if I'm really interested in working for a pharmaceutical company, then perhaps I want to look at jobs and organizations and networks that are based in New Jersey, or based in the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, or based in San Diego, or based in Boston, or based in the Bay Area. In other words, I want to look in areas where there are clusters of a critical mass of companies in that particular industry. These are things that you can Google, you can find out. You can Google industry cluster biotechnology to find out where some of the clusters are. Or if you have a particular geographic region that you're interested in moving to, you can Google, San Diego biotech to find out if there is a biotech organization in San Diego. Of course, in Houston, what is one of the major industry clusters in Houston? Oil and gas. There's a huge oil and gas presence in Houston, as you know. The associations are important because this is going to serve as a place, as a source for your networking, and this is going to be very, very essential for you to learn more about your industry and to gaining a foothold into the decision makers, the trend makers, the leaders in the industry. So you need to know, who are the trend makers? What are the trends in the industry? Where are they going right now? What's the economic landscape? Are a lot of large companies operating, or a lot of small companies? Is there a lot of startups right now in this particular area? What are the major publications? What are the major conferences? Again, both of those things, the publications and the conferences, serve as sources for networking and for information gathering. What are the entry points? If I want to go into oil and gas, what are the entry points to this industry? How can I start and get a job in this industry with this degree that I have right now? And finally, who can help me? And that's going to be your networking, right? Okay, so let's transition. So you've done all this research, you've written all this down, what you need to figure out for the selected industry that you are interested in infiltrating. Okay, you have a particular industry in mind, maybe you have a couple of industries in mind, a couple of different sectors in mind. You figured out that you need to know what the decision makers are, who the decision makers are, who are the major players, where can I find sources of people to network with. Now we need to talk about how you can find, access, assess, and land opportunities within these industries, outside of academia. The major thing you need to know about opportunities is, number one, most opportunities are hidden, okay? So for every job that you see advertised on a website or on a job board somewhere, for every job that you see advertised, there are going to be something like 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 jobs that people are going to get, not from posting their resume and not by applying for an advertised job. They are going to get that job because of networking, exclusively through networking. I cannot overemphasize. It is networking that opens access to what I call the hidden platter of opportunities. And the thing is that most opportunities are hidden. Most opportunities are not even jobs. An opportunity could be anything that could lead to anything. It could be an opportunity to have coffee with somebody. I'm at AGU fall meeting. I see Dr. God walk by. Wow, it's Dr. God. He runs this lab, or he's in charge of this, or he's in charge of that. I see him walk by. That's an opportunity. And believe me, I have actually stopped people in their tracks at conferences. I once saw Steve Forbes at a conference, and I just yelled out, "Hey, Steve!" And he stopped, and I ran up to him, and as he walked, because he continued walking, I walked with him, matched his pace, and I just said, "Hi, my name is Elena Levine. I do X, Y, and Z. I'd love to talk to you. Could I make a phone appointment with you about A, B, and C?" He said, "Sure." I said, "Do you have a card?" He said, "No." I said, "Here's my card. Could you write down your email address for me?" And he did. And that was like a 30-second, maybe 1 minute long conversation that I had with somebody. That was a hidden opportunity. You will find hidden opportunities everywhere as you start looking, as you start investigating your industry. The key thing is you want to keep your eye open for them. And since every opportunity leads to another, every opportunity to interact with somebody, every opportunity to go to a mixer, every opportunity to have a conversation, and opportunities to apply for awards, opportunities to serve on committees, opportunities to to serve on boards, and opportunities to apply for jobs. Every opportunity will lead you to another opportunity. In fact, in my life, I can actually tell you that where I am today, I can actually mark it back in time. Opportunity led to opportunity, led to opportunity, led to where I am today. So, but most of those opportunities were hidden. They were only presented to me like a platter, like that hidden platter of opportunities that I just mentioned to you, because I was networking and because I was getting myself out there and promoting my reputation. So seize as many as you can, look for opportunities where others don't. And since we are talking about business in particular, and I know scientists in their minds innately are innovators and are entrepreneurial thinkers, you can always look to create an opportunity that you need or want if you see that it is not available to you. In fact, that's where some of the most successful and most wildly successful people have succeeded in, is when they wanted an opportunity they couldn't find, they created it themselves. So we access these hidden opportunities, we access these hidden jobs, these hidden careers, these hidden entry points into industries through knowing and articulating our value, knowing what the other party finds valuable, networking, which I'm going to talk more about, and reputation management. And I want to just point out one more thing about hidden opportunities. You know, when you see a job advertised, particularly on websites, and I know this can bring a lot of frustration for you because you are not alone in being one of many, many, many people around the world. You see a job advertised for company X on the website, you apply for it, and then, surprise, surprise, the job ad disappears, let's say, within a couple of days. Does that mean that that job was actually filled in 3 days, that they found a candidate out of thousands and thousands of people that applied? Absolutely not. Do you know how that job was filled? You know it. It was filled because somebody at the company knew somebody who delivered somebody else's resume from external or internal to the company. In other words, through networks, that job was filled. It was a hidden opportunity. I have a job in my company. I have a big oil and gas company, and I have an opportunity to fill this position. I would rather, I have two choices. I post a job ad online and I get 1,000 resumes, or you come down the hall and tell me that your protege, Paul, who's so fabulous and talented in oil and gas and has done this experience and has had this internship or has done this type of problem solving in the lab, would be able to assist me in this job. I'm going to look at Paul's resume first. And guess what? I'm probably going to hire Paul because that's going to save me a lot of work. I don't want to have to look through 1,000 resumes. And you vouched for him. So that is a hidden opportunity that has been given to Paul because of networking, because he knew the right people. He knew the decision makers. He knew the trend makers in the industry, in the company. So this is why networking is so important to accessing hidden opportunities, and this is why hidden opportunities are so important to your concept of transitioning outside of academia. So as you learn about your selected industry, you're going to, as I mentioned, you're going to start translating your experience into their language, and you're going to present your experience in terms of the problems you were given, the solutions you came up with, the results of those solutions, and if you can quantify those results, that's fantastic. And then ultimately, you bring this all back and demonstrate to the other party how this problem-solving experience uniquely positions you to do X for that company. Now, when I say present your experience, what I mean is, where are you presenting this experience? You're doing it on your LinkedIn profile. You're doing it on your resume. You're doing it in your brand statement, your value statement, your 30-second commercial. When you first meet somebody, when you're networking with them at a networking mixer, you're talking about the problems you've had, the solutions you've come up with, and the results of those solutions. When you're at a job interview. When you're at a job interview, they're going to ask you, tell me about a time where you did X. What they're really asking is, tell me about a time where you had to solve a problem. What was the solution you came up with, and what were the results of those solutions? So in your marketing material, which is your resume, your LinkedIn profile, your cover letter, anything that's going to be out there that could essentially, your cold emails, that could essentially engage me, that would want to entice me to learn more about you, you're going to be talking about your problem solution results. So for example, on your resume or your LinkedIn profile, job X, my RA-ship under Dr. X at the University of Arizona, each of those bullet points could be a potential problem solution result. And if you want some ideas about that, you can take a look at my LinkedIn profile, which you'll have a chance to see the link for at the end of this session. But I just wanted you to be thinking in terms of problem solution results, since that's how industry functions, that's how they think, that's how they communicate, that's how they talk, and that's how they assess your expertise and your brand. So that's why you need to start thinking in those terms so that when the opportunity arises for you to communicate it, you will know how to communicate it in such a way that they will want to learn more. So we're talking about opportunity identification. We need to know what opportunities exist, what opportunities lead to which opportunities, which lead to which opportunities, how people find out about these opportunities, what skills are needed, the assignments required. We need to know the organizational and vocational culture of that company and that industry, what kind of application or resume is required, and what are the deadlines for these opportunities. You find this stuff out via networking. You find this stuff out via reading. You can find this stuff out by engaging the professional societies. Being a member of AGU, for example, it allows you to engage with companies that know that AGU members are going to be a coveted member of their workforce. And we continue our conducting of our research. We gather information about regions, organizations, learn if they're hiring, learn what their economic ecosystem is like. Did they just have a big layoff and they're trying to increase their capacity now? Did they just get a huge loan from the government so they have a lot of opportunities? Contact chambers of commerce, read the newspapers and regional publications of the areas where you physically want to move, and look for online sources and localized content. Now, you're still in the opportunity identification phase. So we want to start networking. We want to start finding out how these opportunities can be accessed and what these opportunities actually are. So we always start with people that we know. We start with trusted contacts. We start with mentors, the people that we know that we can interact with. We engage the professional organizations and participate in the regional chapters, if there's regional chapters. We read the related publications. We network both via social media and in person. We go to related conferences, and if we can't attend a conference, we follow the Twitter feed for the conference and look at the conference brochure and contact the people that are speaking at the conference so that you can start the conversation. The most important thing is networking. And I want to just clarify what I mean by networking. Networking is not going to a conference, sharing some meatballs with somebody, talking about the weather, and then never speaking to them again. That's not networking. That is a waste of time. Networking is a spectrum of activities, which begins with that very first interaction. It aims for a mutually beneficial partnership. It involves myriad correspondence and actions that provide value to every party. And it ends only when one or both of you drop dead. And that is what networking is. It's a constant interaction. It's a constant exchange of value between both parties. And when you think about it in that way, if you orchestrate your career plan in terms of networking in that regard, you will start to see that more and more hidden opportunities become known to you. You will become aware of them, and you will be able to pursue them. And so networking is based on 6 degrees of separation. And the key thing here on this slide right here that I just want you to be aware of is when you're networking, when you're interacting with people and you're talking to them, you want to gather information about their industry. You want to gather information about their company. So you're going to be asking for informational interviews. You actually can use that term. You say, it's so nice meeting you at this conference. Would it be possible for me to follow up with you next week? I'd love to have an informational interview with you. Or you could say, I'd love to continue this conversation and learn more about what you do. And the key thing there is when you say informational interview to me, it's a password to me that tells me that you're not trying to get a job from me, you're not desperate for a job from me right now, you're not trying to extract something from me, but instead you are literally looking for an exchange of information. You want to learn more about me, and you want to share things about yourself so that you can build a partnership, a mutually beneficial partnership. And if you go into networking thinking in terms of mutually beneficial partnerships and thinking about with every person that I meet at AGU fall meeting, at other conferences, that's just the start of the networking. That gives me the the jumping off point for the networking to continue after that, then I'm going to see what I can do to build a partnership with this person over a lifetime, over a long time, so that then I can learn about different opportunities, different job opportunities, and different experiences that might give me access to other opportunities. So that's how you want to think about networking. So you want to ask for informational interviews. You can also call them informal conversations. You talk to them about what they've done, talk to them about all those questions that I just presented earlier to you. Those are the types of questions that you can ask in your informational interviews. And then you send a thank you note and you stay connected. And for everybody that you talk to, you ask, is there anybody else I should be speaking to about this? So I wanted to leave you here today to kickstart your career plan with a couple of tasks so that you would be ready to go to transition out of academia. So you're going to start with that skill inventory matrix, which I showed you before. You're going to start thinking about, how do I translate my skills into the language of industry? We're going to think about what types of careers. We're going to use the SWOT analysis too. And we're going to start thinking, what are the types of opportunities that would be right for somebody with me, with my skills, with my interests, and with my values. In other words, what do I hold sacred? Here I'm using the word value differently than I've used it earlier. And a wonderful free resource for you online is myidp.sciencecareers.org. This is my individual development plan put together by Science Careers, so it's by Science Magazine. It's a great resource, and it can help you start planning your career outside of academia. You're going to also start thinking about opportunity identification, and really your biggest job right now is going to be networking, networking, networking. Finding people for your network, asking for informational interviews or informal conversations, and trying to gain as much information about that industry, that company, that organization as you possibly can. So here's my homework for you. Identify 3 tasks, just 3 tasks, that you will take in the next 2 weeks to aid you in identifying opportunities that are right for you. And one of those tasks could be simply opening up myidp.sciencecareers.org. Another one could be, if I'm interested in the oil and gas industry, going onto the website for one of the major oil and gas industry organizations and contacting one of the leaders of that organization and asking for an informational interview over Skype or the phone. So just take 3 tasks that will move you outside of academia in the next 2 weeks. That's my suggestion to you. And this, you'll see this on myidp.sciencecareers.org. This is just goals that you can set for yourself, the type of goals that you should set for yourself. They're called SMART. It stands for specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and timely. Now, of course, we want to keep the door open to coming back to academia. Absolutely do we want to do that. So what we do is we continue networking. Yes, networking solves all of our problems. We keep the channels open. We let people know in academia what we're working on. If we move out of academia, we stay in touch with our PhD mentor, with our postdoc mentor, with our master's degree mentor. If you see and read a paper, and you should be doing this, you should be reading the academic journals, even if you move into the business world. If you have a thought that I will want to move into academia someday, maybe in the future, maybe go back to become a professor or a lecturer or an administrator, or maybe even just a guest speaker, or maybe to work on a project with somebody in academia, keep your foot in that world. Read the academic journals that are related to your research or related to the research that you aspire to work in. Go to the conferences. Interact with people. Set up appointments to talk. Set up appointments to have informal conversations. Set up appointments to have these informational interviews. So keep networking. And keep your brand and your reputation clean and pristine, and keep it known to the people in the academic world. You know, a few months ago when I was writing an article for Science Magazine, and you can find this somewhere on the net, it was an article about marketing your skills as a postdoc. I wrote about a young woman who was from Greece, and she had left Greece to go and do her PhD and postdoc work, I believe in Germany and the United States. But her goal was to come back to Greece to work in an academic institution. And even though she was gone for about 5 or 6 years, she spent that entire time continuously networking with people in Greece. So she would email them about articles that she read that would be of interest to them. She went to their conferences. She couldn't go to the conference. She contacted the speakers to make herself known and to say that she was interested in what they were talking about. She kept her foot very well planted in the Greek academic system, to the point where suddenly she was starting to get, and she would also volunteer. This is another hidden opportunity that she took advantage of. Every time she went back home for a visit, she would contact her alma mater in advance and her research advisor from her undergrad days and say, I'm going to be in town anyway. Do you mind? I'd love to volunteer and give a talk at the colloquium in the department while I'm in town. And they, of course, were appreciative, and they did that. And pretty soon they were introducing her to other people in the Greek system throughout the country. Pretty soon she was leveraging that, and she was getting invitations from other universities in the system. And by the time her postdoc was done, she had job opportunities, solid job opportunities, not even leads, but job opportunities waiting for her in Greece. And I know we're talking today about transitioning out of academia and then maybe coming back in the future, but I wanted to just give that to you as an example of someone who did it right. She kept networking. She kept her reputation fresh so that she would always have a door open if there was a possibility, if she was interested in the future. So in conclusion, I want to emphasize that industry, quote unquote, the outside academia, meaning industry wants you. You have the skills, you have the experience, you have the value of interest to industry, and you have a lot more of these things than you might even realize, which means that you have a lot more career possibilities than you might even realize. But your goal here is you have to identify what your brand is, what your promise of value is, your unique blend of skills and problem-solving abilities, and then research the industry that you actually want to go into, and then be able to communicate your brand in their language to enable them to make a decision to hire you, or at least to engage you and want to learn more about you in an interview. And you do this through constant networking. Networking is like another full-time job, but let me tell you, it pays dividends. It's worth its weight in platinum. So keep your eyes open for opportunities, particularly hidden opportunities, opportunities to volunteer, opportunities to have a cup of coffee with somebody. If you read a paper, contact the author. If you see somebody quoted in an article, contact the person and say, I thought this was great. I'd love to talk to you about X, Y, and Z. And then keep that door open to academia. Let the people in academia know what you're working on. Go back and forth, networking with them. Dr. X, I work for this company right now, but I read your paper in Nature. I thought it was interesting. Love to talk to you. Maybe there's a chance for us to collaborate right now. Maybe there's a way I can assist you with your projects right now. And that's how you create these hidden opportunities. So I want to thank you so much. We have a lot of questions. I'm going to stick around for just a few minutes. I know a bunch of you have to go, and let me tell you this. All of the questions that people have written in, I'm going to answer anonymously in the companion article to this webinar that's going to be posted on the AGU Career Center website. And you'll get an email when that is posted. So I know some of you have to skedaddle, and that's not a problem because you'll get all the answers anyway. So, but I did want to tell you that the next webinar that's coming up is going to be happening Tuesday, November 16th. We're still deciding what we want to present at that webinar. So if you have ideas, if there's some subject that we have not touched on relating to your career and relating to your professional development and relating to your professional advancement that you're dying to have discussed by moi, send me an email, tweet me, and let me know, because I want to help you. I want to serve you. I want to make sure that you understand the value that you have in myriad industries, that you have so many opportunities ahead of you, and I want to help you clarify that to the right parties. So I thank you very, very much. This was an honor and a privilege as usual. As I mentioned, I'm going to stick around to answer as many questions as I can. For those of you that have to leave, you'll get a chance to get the answers to those questions on the companion article, and you can even write in questions right now if you have them. So let me go ahead and jump on to some of these questions. And so thank you very much. This was a great honor, and I'll see you on November 16th, and I'll see you also, of course, at the AGU fall meeting. That'll be fabulous. I'll be speaking there, so definitely stop by. All right, so here's one question. I often find out what I love by trying. I often find out what I love by trying out different things, for example, through internships. However, even for internships, employers often want you to be pretty darn sure that you would like to pursue this career, and therefore they don't invest time into you, and then they decide, and they don't invest time into you, and then you decide to leave the industry again. I find it hard to sell myself saying, quote, I want to do an internship because I want to find out if I like the industry. Great question. Okay, let me tell you the secret about internships. Internships are not about you, the person. They are not about you, the individual. An internship, quite honestly, is a company's way of very inexpensively auditioning a potential hire. When I hire somebody for a full-time job, it is a lot of money. It costs a lot of money, and I don't just mean the salary. It costs money to recruit, it costs money to market, it costs money to post, it costs money to actually fly you out there, it costs money in terms of the time that it takes away from my job and those people that you're going to be interacting with, and then it costs time and money to get you up to speed. So it's extremely expensive. Depending on who you ask, sometimes the cost, the real cost of actually hiring somebody could be 2 or 3 or even 4 times the amount of salary they're giving you, okay? So if you're being hired in for a $100,000 a year career, they could be paying $200,000 just to hire you. So that's a lot of money. They want to audition people. They want to try you out and see whether or not you would be good in this corporate culture via an internship. So an internship in many regards is not about you learning the trade, learning the problem, learning the company. It's more about, is this person a good fit in my company? Now, with that in mind, I, as a hiring manager, I, as somebody who is representative of a company and runs an internship program, recognizes that if I'm hiring people who are early in their career, they may not have all of the skills, they may not have all of the experience that's necessary in that job. But what I do need to see is your attitude. This is where it comes back to attitude. So it's not about you learning. In fact, you should never put on your resume that you have an objective to gain a challenging experience or a job where I can use my critical thinking skills. Because the job search and the internship search is never about you, the job seeker. It's always about what you, the job seeker, can do for me, the decision maker. That's the truth. That's the brutal, honest truth. So if that's the case, that means that with an internship, rather than saying, I want to learn more about your industry, it should be more of, I am really interested in these problems because I did X, Y, and Z in my undergraduate years. Or I learned to be a leader as a student organizer, and so I'm able to do this and this, and I would be a great person in this particular position. I can solve these problems in this way. I am very excited to join your organization because I've done my research. I know that you've done this, this, and this. So talk to me when you're looking for an internship, instead of talking about what you want to get out of it. I mean, that is part of it, definitely. The majority of what you should be talking about is what you can contribute to it. And then that communicates to me your attitude. It communicates to me that you are recognizing that your job as an intern is to learn the ropes of the company and to learn the corporate culture to see if your attitude is a match and your personality is a match to the needs of that company. And internship programs exist to audition people to see if you would be good for bringing in as a full-time hire. So don't go into thinking it as, don't go into it and as a way of, when you do go into an internship, don't go into it by communicating that I want to learn from you, I want to learn how to be a better oil and gas professor, or oil and gas professional, etc., etc. It should all be about them. I want to do this for you. I want to do that for you. Great question. Okay, so another person asked this question. As an astrophysicist, I love that. That's a great start to the question. As an astrophysicist, my work is a little beyond what may be considered quote-unquote everyday applications. How can I apply my work to business and industry? Thank you for that question. Okay, as an astrophysicist, you have a lot of skills. It goes back to what we talked about. First of all, you have top-notch computing skills, top-notch data analytics skills. And I can tell you for a fact that companies like Facebook, companies like LinkedIn, like Microsoft, like Apple, they hire astrophysicists. Companies like Pixar, Disney, they hire astrophysicists because they recognize that the problems that you solve as an astrophysicist are very similar to the problems that you would solve in that environment. It's just a different ecosystem. The problems are slightly different, but it's still very similar. And the skills that you're using are very, very similar. In fact, they are the same. So what the key thing is if you want to transition out of academia, particularly those of you that are in astronomy, in astrophysics, and I work with you guys a lot. In fact, I go to the American Astronomical Society conference, and as many of you know, I write for Physics Today. I write their career column, and you'll find some very good advice. That's my advice, but I think you'll find some good advice if you take a look at some of my columns on Physics Today. You know, for those of you who have theoretical backgrounds, you still can find out what are the coveted skills in the industry that you want to go to. You can still network with people in those industries, and you can still find out what are the vocabulary words, what are the terms, how do they phrase their problems, how do they phrase their skills, their value, so that you can then start just translating your expertise into that language. And that's the key thing. Because really, as an astrophysicist, you do have a lot of expertise. You do have a lot of valuable expertise that I, in industry, would be very, very willing to hire you to do. It's just a matter of communicating that expertise in my language. The way you learn how to do that is by networking, by talking with people, and by who are in the industry, who have similar backgrounds to you, and who have gone on and have done amazing things. And a really good resource is on LinkedIn, and for those of you that are in astronomy and astrophysics, there's a great LinkedIn group called Astronomers Beyond Academia. That's in LinkedIn, called Astronomers Beyond Academia. They have some really good stories and people there that are floating around about astronomers who have moved outside of academia and have found really exciting careers. Thank you for that question. I'll take one more, and then the rest of the questions I'm going to put in that article as I mentioned to you. Okay. Many times, jobs ask for various degrees or experience that do not relate directly to our actual training, but for which we have transferable skills. How can our science background get us through automatic screenings? Great question, and it's the same situation, same answer as the previous questions. You need to know how to communicate using their language. If I had used the word student, recruiting students, on my resume when I was looking to transition out of academia, I would have gotten nowhere. I would have gotten nowhere. Not only would I have not passed any website job board that was trying to hire or any application, but if my resume actually ended up in front of the eyeballs of an actual person, they would have seen the word student recruiting, and they would have thought, she doesn't know anything about what we do in business. She's only worked in academia. That means nothing to me. But instead, I used the word customer, and so they knew that since I was speaking their language to begin with, that I could then solve their problems. So to get you through those automatic screenings, you have to know what are the skills that they consider to be valuable, what is the vocabulary that that industry and company uses to communicate those skills, and then you have to translate your resume, your LinkedIn profile, your job application into that language. So you should never submit just your CV where you talk about your research. Instead, you should submit a resume that goes into detail about experience and skills that mirror the job ad or mirror jobs that are in the industry or in the company. So that was a really great question. So we do have tons of other questions here, but unfortunately we don't have time, and my computer just made that weird noise. But I wanted to thank you guys so much again. This was a really, really terrific opportunity for me to talk with you. Talk to you, I guess. I didn't get a chance to hear you, but I really loved your questions. And some people were asking if the audio file will be available. I will make the recording of this available, so you will have the chance to review it again. And like I said, I'll be putting together a companion article which will appear on the AGU Career Center website soon. So you'll get emails from me. Stay in touch. If you have other questions you'd like me to answer, send me emails, tweet me, whatever you want to do. If you want to make it anonymous, you can send me an email, and I'm happy to work with you. Thank you so much. Special thanks to AGU for their continued support of your career advancement and professional development. And I will see you guys again on November 16th and at the AGU Fall Meeting in San Francisco in December. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day. And best, you know what? I'm not going to wish you luck. I'm just going to say have a great time in your career. You don't need the luck because you have the skills. So just have a great time. Thanks, everybody.